All right, so Joe Biden just attended the G7 summit alongside many other Western wealthy imperialist countries, and part of what they discussed, although they didn't phrase it in this way, was the ongoing vaccine apartheid, this global phenomenon where wealthy imperialist countries around the world are successfully vaccinating large portions of their population. Meanwhile, we have entire continents like Africa that have basically not vaccinated anyone, and there really isn't a plan to get many of them vaccinated in the near future. And so as part of this, they made a promise to donate millions and millions of vaccines, and although it may look good as a headline with hundreds of millions of vaccines potentially being donated, this is nowhere close to addressing the problem. And the solution that I've been pushing from the beginning is the same solution that health experts, public health experts, global public health experts have been pushing from the beginning as well, and that is relinquishing the COVID vaccine patents so that we can actually allow the floodgates essentially to open around the world for vaccine manufacturing, so that we actually can have the adequate supply necessary to vaccinate the entire world instead of protecting the profits of these giant pharmaceutical companies. And so this is the plan that they rolled out, and it's just completely inadequate. So here's what they say in Common Dreams. Rich nations' vaccine pledges includes just 613 million new doses, well short of the promised 1 billion. Quote, a single factory could produce this number in a year if you waived the patents. So again, we're already far behind. We should have been getting on this from the beginning, and we could have already had billions and billions of vaccines being produced by this point. But of course, still, with countries and governments and people like Joe Biden and the rest of these other wealthy Western imperialist countries being basically owned by the big pharmaceutical industry, there hasn't really been any serious action on this. So they continue. A group of the world's richest nations, vowed Sunday to collectively donate at least 1 billion coronavirus vaccine doses to developing nations over the next year, but a closer look reveals that pledge includes just 613 million new doses, a paltry sum compared to the 11 billion doses that experts say will be needed to inoculate 70% of the global population. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove and Alberto Nardelli reported that in order to reach the promised 1 billion dose figure, G7 leaders, quote, included pledges made starting back in February. Continuing on, quote, so far, the G7 countries have promised 613 million truly new doses, including some funded in part by previously announced aid. Wingrove and Nardelli noted, if doses already announced in recent weeks by G7 and EU nations are included, the tally grows to roughly 870 million doses. And then this is just completely inadequate, and here's what they say about that. Already outraged by the inadequacy of the 1 billion dose commitment, which, if fulfilled, would have provided enough shots to protect just 11% of the world's unvaccinated population, public health campaigners said the G7 countries' inflation of their pledge with older promises further underscores the failure of the closely watched summit in Cornwall, England over the weekend. The gathering took place as developing nations in Africa, South America, and Asia are experiencing deadly COVID-19 waves as they struggle to get their vaccination campaigns off the ground. So what does this mean? This is just a continuation of the ongoing vaccine apartheid that we have been seeing for months and months and months now. So Joe Biden basically tepidly said he supported waiving the COVID vaccine patent waivers, but we still have many other countries, in Europe especially. I think France was the only other member of the G7 group that met that actually does back the vaccine patent waivers. So we still have a lot of these imperialist countries that are standing in the way of actually vaccinating the entire population. And I've been making these same goddamn arguments from the beginning because they remain to be the same. The only benefit that there is in protecting the big pharmaceutical profits over vaccinating everybody is for the big pharmaceutical companies. Those are the only people that benefit. It's not for the benefit of public health. In fact, it's to the direct detriment of public health, because if you don't vaccinate entire continents like Africa, then guess what? COVID is going to continue to spread. There will be new variants that pop up as an inevitability. And those new variants, because of our global interconnected economy, will eventually travel to the United States and Europe, and could potentially undo a lot of the progress that we have made in our own countries on vaccinating our own populations and inoculating ourselves from the virus. So basically, these wealthy Western imperialist countries are choosing to risk the potential ability for us to move to a post-COVID world or anything closely resembling that. They are willing to risk that for the sake of big pharmaceutical companies. So what does that say about the state of our governments across the wealthy, developed world, if you want to call it that? What does that say about our governments? Well, it says that, again, they are completely bought and owned and controlled by these big pharmaceutical companies, and they are afraid to confront them. And it really is not a complicated solution, right? We saw the articles back months ago where they revealed that basically there are literally factories around the world that, if they were given the adequate technology and information necessary in order to produce vaccines, could have hundreds of millions of doses within a matter of months. So this is what's holding it up. We still have countries that are standing in the way of this waiver, the TRIPS waiver that was put forward by India and South Africa to waive the COVID vaccine patents. And we still have a lot of these leaders from the G7 that are standing in the way of it as they get together to promise basically something that is completely and totally inadequate to actually solving the problem. I mean, this is analogous to how we always say billionaire philanthropy is just PR, in the same way that billionaire philanthropy and charity is not going to solve the problem of poverty because it is an underlying structural problem. In the same way, donating a couple 100 million vaccine doses is not going to be anywhere close to enough to actually solve the pandemic problem. So, again, the answer is really simple. You still have to waive the vaccine patents. Joe Biden, if he actually supports this, would be putting pressure on his allies. The United States, believe it or not, is still the most powerful country in the world. We have a lot of leverage to wield over these countries, and so he has a responsibility to do that and push this as aggressively as possible. And if you're going to go the donation route, then at least donate enough to necessarily solve the problem. I mean, even the promises that they are making are not enough, and then they're not even following up on those promises. But the promises themselves, like they just said, even if the 1 billion dose amount was completely fulfilled, that would only be 11% of the way that we need to be eventually getting to. So it's completely inadequate. There's no end in sight for entire continents like Africa, Southeast Asia, South America. People are just being left to die, to suffer and die in mass for the sake of big pharmaceutical companies.